to make a grand entrance today. Hi, my name is Miss Mimi and I'm so excited to be here again with you. I came with my book for today, but before we dive into the book, I have a little game for us to play. So we're going to be playing a trivia game where we're going to find out how good your knowledge of fairy tales is, okay? So get ready. So the first one I have is this. The rule for this game is, you can write what you think the answer is in the comment section and then we'll know. Okay, in this story, a shoe was the key to change the character's life. A shoe was the key that changed the character's life. What fairy tale do you think we're talking about here? I'm not going to say the answer now. I'm going to say the answer at the end of this video. So put your answer down before you get to the end. The second one. A mirror and an apple caused harm in this story. A mirror and an apple caused harm in this story. What story is this? What fairy tale is this? This is very easy. Come on, easy peasy. Okay, we're getting to, I think the last one is one that's kind of tricky, but the third one goes this way. It's simple. It's hair, oh hair. Hair, oh hair. What fairy tale is that? This is easy. You just need to pay attention. Hair, oh hair. And then the final one. The name of this person was used to play a guessing game. This one is, if you really read fairy tales, this should be easy. But if you don't, this might be a bit tricky. But for this last question, I'm going to say it again. The name of this person was used to play a guessing game in this story. An additional tip is, the name of the person was the title of the story. Which actually is true for most of the fairy tales that we know, right? But let's see. The name of this person was used to play a guessing game in this story. Let's see if you can guess it. I will reveal the answers at the end of the story. Thank you for playing. Now, today's story is titled Curious George Rides a Bike. Curious George is a very popular character. There are books, there are videos, games based on Curious George, so I cannot wait to find out what he does in this book. This is George. George lived with his friend, and the man with the yellow hat. He was a good little monkey and always very curious. Do you know the meaning of curious? It means someone who's always inquisitive, who asks questions, who wants to know things, right? So George was always curious. This morning, George was curious the moment he woke up because he knew it was a special day. This is George being curious as he wakes up. At breakfast, George's friend said, "Today we are going to celebrate because just 3 years ago this day, I brought you home with me from the jungle. So tonight I will take you to the animal show. But first, I have a surprise for you." That's George and that's his friend. He took George out to the yard where a big box was standing. George was very curious. Out of the box came a bicycle. George was delighted. That's what he'd always wanted. He knew how to ride a bicycle, but he had never had one of his own. "I must go now," said the man, "but I will be back in time for the show. Be careful with your new bike and keep close to the house while I am gone." So that's George, that's the man leaving, and that's the box where his bike came in, and this is the man's car. George could ride very well. He could even do all sorts of tricks. Monkeys are quite good at that. For instance, he could ride his way this way with both hands off the handlebar. That's George riding with both hands off the handlebar. And he could ride this way, like a cowboy, on a wild bronco. And he could also ride backwards. But after a while, he got tired of doing tricks. And went out into the street. The newsboy was just passing by with his bag full of papers. "Oh, that's a fine bag you have there," he said to George. "How would you like to help me deliver the papers?" Of course, George was excited to do that. He handed George the bag and told him to do one side of the street first and then turn back and do the other side. George was very proud as he rode off with his bag. That's George, paperboy, bag. He started to deliver the papers on one side of the street, as he had been told. When he came to the last house, he saw a little river in the distance, and George was curious. He wanted to know what the river was like, so instead of turning back to deliver the rest of the papers, he just went on. Oh my goodness. There was a lot to see at the river. A man was fishing from the bridge. A duck family was paddling downstream. And two boys were playing with their boats. George would have liked to stop and look at the boats, but he was afraid the boys might find out that he had not delivered all the papers. So he rode on. While riding, oh my goodness, I can just begin to think about what George is gonna do. Can you guess what George is thinking about? I'm looking at this picture and I think I can guess what George wants to do. I hope I'm wrong because that would be a terrible idea. Anyway, while riding along, George kept thinking of boats all the time. It would be such fun to have a boat, but how could he get one, he thought. He thought and he thought and he thought, and then he had an idea. I was right, guys. I was right. He got off the bicycle, took a newspaper out of the bag and began to fold it. First, he folded the corners down like this. If you have a paper with you right now, let's try making this boat together with Curious George. So here's George. He folded the paper down like this. Don't use a newspaper. Don't use important paper for this. Then he folded both edges up like this. And then he brought the ends together like this. And he flattened it sideways. And then he turned one corner up. And then the other one. Again, he brought the ends together like this and flattened it sideways. Then he gently pulled the ends open. And ta-da! There was his boat! Now, the moment had come to launch the boat. Would it float? It did! So, George decided to make some more boats. Oh my goodness, not this, George. Finally, he had used up all the papers and had made so many boats that he could not count them. A whole fleet of boats. Oh my goodness. Look at all those boats, guys. Watching his fleet sailing down the river, George felt like an admiral. But watching his fleet, he forgot to watch where he was going. And let me think, he bumped into someone? He tripped? What could have happened? Let's find out. Oops. Suddenly there was a terrible jolt. The bicycle had hit a rock, and George flew off the seat head first. Oh no. Luckily, George was not hurt, but the front wheel of the bicycle was all out of shape and the tire was blown out. A quick note before we move on. This is a lesson to always use a helmet when riding a bike, because it could have been worse if George hit his head on something harmful without a helmet. So if you want to ride your bike, please put on a helmet first, okay? Don't be like George. George tried to ride the bicycle, but of course he wouldn't go. So he started carrying it, but soon it got too heavy. George did not know what to do. His new bike was spoiled. The newspapers were gone. He wished he had listened to his friend and kept close to the house. Now he just stood there and cried. Suddenly, his face brightened. Why? He had forgotten that he could ride on one wheel. He tried it and it worked. He hardly started out again when he saw something. Oh my goodness, what did you see now, George? He had never seen before. Rolling toward him came an enormous tractor with huge trailers behind it. Looking out of the trailers were all sorts of animals. To George, it looked like a zoo on wheels. Oh my goodness, I'm so sad. I don't know. I feel like something bad's about to happen. The tractor stopped and two men jumped out. Well. A little monkey who can ride a bike, Bronco fashion. We can use you in our animal show tonight. I am the director of the show and this is Bob. He can straighten your wheel and fix that flat in no time. And then we'll take you along to the place where the show is gonna be. I don't know if that's such a good idea, guys. What do you think? I don't know. Anyway, the three of them got into a cab and off they drove. Maybe you could play a fanfare while you ride your bike in the show, the director said. I have a bauble for you right here. And later on, you'll get a green coat and a cap. Just like Bugs. On the showground, everybody was busy getting things ready for the show. I must do some work now, said the director. Meanwhile, you may have a look around and get acquainted with all the animals. But you must not feed them, especially the ostrich, because he will eat anything and he might get sick afterwards. That's the circus. George was curious. Will the ostrich really eat anything? I need to stop here right now, guys, because what is this? Why is George so curious that he's willing to try out anything? He wouldn't eat a bugger, or would he? George went a little closer to the cage, and before he knew it, the ostrich had snatched the bubble and tried to swallow it. But a bubble is hard to swallow, even for an ostrich. It got stuck in his throat. Funny sounds came out of the bubble as the ostrich was struggling with it, all blue in the face. Ooh, a bubble is kind of like a trumpet. George was frightened. Fortunately, the men had heard the noise. They came rushing to the cage and got the bubble out of the ostrich's throat just in time. But the director was very angry with George. We cannot use little monkeys who don't do as they're told. Of course, you cannot take part in the show now. We will have to send you home, he said. George had to sit on the bench all by himself and nobody even looked at him. He was terribly sorry for what he had done, but now it was too late. He had spoiled everything. Kids, just a note that sometimes being curious is not always great. Meanwhile, the ostrich, always hungry, had got all hold of a string dangling near the cage. This happened to be the string which held the door to the cage of the baby bear. As the ostrich nibbled at it, the door opened and the baby bear got out. He ran away as fast as he could and made straight for a high tree near the camp. Nobody had seen it but George. And George was not supposed to leave his bench. But this was an emergency, right? So he jumped up, grabbed the bubble, and blew as loud as he could. Then he rushed to his bicycle. The men had heard the alarm and thought at first that George had been naughty again. But when they saw the empty cage and the ostrich nibbling at the string, they knew what had happened. George raced down the tree, far ahead, raced toward the tree, far ahead of the men. By now, the bear had climbed quite high, and this was dangerous because little bears can climb up a tree easily, but coming down is much harder, and they may fall and get hurt. The men were worried. They did not know how to get him down safely, but George had his plan. With the bag over his shoulder, he went up the tree as fast as only a monkey can, and when he reached the baby bear, he put him in his bag and carefully let him down so that the men could safely catch him. Everybody cheered George when he got down from the tree. "You are a brave little monkey," said the director. "You saved the baby bear's life. Now you get your coat back, and of course you may ride your bike and play the bugle in the show." Yay! I'm excited for George. Finally, the show was on. The whole town had come to see it, and how surprised they were to discover George on his bike, right in the middle of it. The newsboy was there too, and also the man with the yellow hat, who had been looking for George everywhere, and he was happy to have found him at last. The newsboy was glad to have his bag again. The people from the other side of the street whose papers George had made into boats were not angry with him anymore. And when the time had come for George to say goodbye, the director let him keep the coat and the cap and the bugle. And then George and his friend got into a car and went home. The end. I enjoyed the story, thoroughly enjoyed it. George is such a funny character. I do like that he tried to make things right after he made things wrong, if that makes any sense. So sometimes being curious doesn't help so much. You have to listen when you're giving advice, when mom says or dad says, don't go there, don't touch that, don't do this. It's not because they just want to say don't do that or stop you from having fun. It is because they know what's going to happen if you do the thing that they've asked you not to do, and it's not particularly good, if you get my drift. Now, the moment that we've all been waiting for, the reveal of the answers to the trivia question. So the first trivia question was, a shoe was the key to change your life. If your answer was Cinderella, you were correct. Well done, Cinderella. We know that the glass slipper was what changed your life forever. The next question was, a mirror and an apple caused harm in this story. If your answer was Snow White, you were right. A mirror and an apple caused harm in that story. Well done. The next question goes like this. I simply said hair, oh hair. That one is Rapunzel. Rapunzel was all about the hair. If your answer was Rapunzel, congratulations, you really do know your fairy tales. And the last but not the least, this one, if you got this one, I wish I could give you a gift. Honestly, if you got it without listening to what I said, oh my goodness, you deserve all the accolades ever. This one said the name of this person was used to play a guessing game. Can you guess the answer to this question? The answer is Rumpelstiltskin. That's not a very popular fairy tale, but it's one that I quite like because of how weird it is. So Rumpelstiltskin, if you don't know this one, you need to go find it out. It's about a weird little guy who wanted to get something from a girl who was asked to spin yarn into gold, something funny like that. And then Rumpelstiltskin helped her spin yarn into gold and got her to live the life she wanted, but said that in return, he wanted her to give him her firstborn child. And then when the time came, she said, oh no, is there anything she can do to get out of it? And Rumpelstiltskin said, if you can guess my name within this so number of days, you can keep your child and I will let you be. And that's how we have the story Rumpelstiltskin. That's the end. Congratulations. If you got 4 out of 4, you are the real MVPs. I am super excited and proud of you. If you had 3 over 4, you're still quite good. If you had 1 over 4, really? Cinderella can't be the only fairy tale, you know. I mean, Just you need to revise your knowledge of fairy tales. Anyway, I've said so much. I've had so much fun with you guys. I will see you here next time. Have a great rest of the week. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe. Once again, my name is Miss Mimi. Bye.